Yeah.
To all of our lives. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Mayor-to-Mayor Roundtable. Today, really excited. My name is, by the way, Jeff Andrews, Business of Childcare. Our topic today, the second in a series of three, really talking about and understanding the ROI of saying yes. And before we get started, before I introduce Mayor Annis and get us going, just a quick introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with Business of Childcare. We're based out of the Minneapolis area. Our mission is to help guide childcare business owners and the communities they serve to better outcomes. And then we do that in a number of ways for communities, activities such as this, helping with planning and understanding, as well as activating for providers themselves. A lot of work helping both family and in-home providers as childcare centers think about their business differently and think about the numbers a little bit differently. Coming up on our 4-year anniversary on Saturday. Really excited about that. And our mission may be a little bit different than many of accustomed to these conversations, is really the idea that childcare unlocks workforce potential, right? It unlocks the opportunity for economic growth. And when we think about many of the communities represented here today, it's about having opportunities to stay closer to home, right? And childcare is an important part of that factor. Our approach is one where we really believe the whole community benefits from childcare, and most of our work is centered, at least in the moment, with the childcare community in the center, understanding that without their sustainability, questions, challenges such as affordability, capacity, and everything else become even more challenging to accomplish. We approach and meet communities at 3 stages of readiness: for understanding impact, developing a plan, and as Mayor Annis and communities like Mapleton are doing, activating once there's some direction. As I say to communities all the time, we got to have an address for success, right? We've got to have an understanding of where we're going and what it is we're trying to accomplish, maybe before we often put the solution train into motion, right? Understanding that outcome becomes really critical. We're proud of the success that we have, but what we understand is that there's also a lot of challenges as to why childcare doesn't get built. We're going to talk about and hit on those, a few of those at least today, but many of them come to the fact that the traditional models of yesterday don't work in most of our communities, right? And so when we think about how do we make it work, we got to think about some of those barriers. And when we understand what it looks like when it can't deliver, Mayor Annis in the first roundtable last month highlighted, and others do as well, it becomes an impediment, right, to some of our other opportunities, growth of the community, attraction of employers, and even keeping of families. And so it's work that we're really excited that we get to do each day. Really excited that we get the opportunity to work with communities on a day in and day basis. And so as we get started here, I do want to take a moment and introduce Mayor Jeff Annis from Mapleton, Minnesota. I'll give him a chance to tell a little bit of his story. But as we do that, and because I respect the fact that not everybody wants to come to a session and be online, love to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box, maybe your name and community you're representing today. And we encourage you to put questions in throughout, raise your hand, just start talking. Again, this is a roundtable and it's designed certainly with some content, but more of a focus on having a discussion as we progress through it. Back to introducing Mayor Annis. We had a chance to meet now it seems like not quite a handful of years ago, but definitely some years ago, and have progressed through a process that engaged the community, provided some direction and a lot of evaluation along the way. And so Mayor Annis, I'll let you tell your story, but I want to share this slide because it's really exciting, the progress that the mayor and the community have made. Mayor, you want to share the highlights of the new pictures on our Mapleton slide here?
Yeah, it was last Wednesday we had our groundbreaking, and we it was a beautiful day, and probably the small kids on the right corner there, they were the hit. They sort of stole the show. But again, it was a great day, and sort of in our timeline of getting this childcare house, off the ground and going, and you're seeing that progress and sort of going towards that finish line. So, and again, as has been talked about, Jeff just mentioned it. probably been at this for, well, 2.5 years at least, just trying to look at numbers and all the different options. So it's been a good process, and again, sort of are finally seeing the groundbreaking, and now hopefully looking to get a provider and continue with progress, towards the finish line and getting this in operation.
And we'll highlight the endpoint, the goal that we're running towards more again here in a moment. But Mayor Annis, maybe share with the audience, when you took office, what did infrastructure mean to you, right? We started to talk more and more about childcare as infrastructure, but even before that, and for many on this session today, we're thinking about infrastructure, but what did it mean to you? Not in theory, not in anything other than the actual budget book, once you started understanding some of the elements that needed attention.
Yeah, of course, infrastructure, again, for a lot of us, right? It's the roads, it's the sewers, it's, the fiber internet, it's all those things that come along our facilities. It was has been a struggle. Our strategic plan, all those kinds of things were issues. And, I sort of looked at it as, we had the jobs and we had some of the housing, but people were having to travel so far to get this daycare, and so it was just hard for us to see development. And again, when those three sort of aren't interconnected, they all suffer a little bit, and I think we probably all have that in our communities in some way, shape, or form. So, that whole that the piece that was missing was that childcare. Um,
And
and
even before the childcare, Mayor Annis, I know you've told this story about the Muni liquor
Yep.
store, right? The fire station and the fire trucks and
Mhm.
the some of those ongoing, even before we dive into childcare, talk a little bit about what that's been looking like, or the struggle or challenge or opportunity, even that you're trying to guide the community through right now.
Yeah, again, the whole facility plan really wasn't in place. And, so where do we go and how do we do this and how do we navigate? And I'm sure someone on the call has probably had to order a fire truck like we did, and $750,000 to $1 million. Um, and where does all those funds come from? And again, trying to establish, we have a municipal liquor store, so again, where, how much funding can we put into that? Do we have to look at updating and um, you know a, to a better facility, and then the dominoes start falling, and so the whole infrastructure was something that we just had to continually look at, and I think that's probably always a struggle for a lot of communities and a lot of mayors and a lot of city councils. So, yeah, it's been sort of ongoing from day one. Now I'm into my third year as mayor, so we're starting to catch up with it, but it's again, uh, it sometimes can be overwhelming, and as we'll probably talk about, you know, adding a $2-3 million center, um, the numbers just didn't work for us. So, uh, yeah. And again, that infrastructure piece, and now again, the more I've gotten into, continually seeing this, um, it's become very apparent that, the infrastructure piece we were really missing is the childcare piece.
Well, and you're highlighting, right? And everybody on this call today understands those cost points, right? We start to look at the cost of infrastructure, and it's a necessary outcome for communities, businesses, family. Like every infrastructure is a real thing, right? And when we start to think about these elements of infrastructure that every town needs, every housing development, been in more and more conversations with emerging housing opportunities, and we talk about the fact we have road there, right? And you have utilities that hook people up. Where are the kids going to go? Right? You said this is to attract families. Where are the kids going to go? Right? And so it's just like some of these other core elements. I think more and more, just like Mayor Annis, and for everybody's benefit, Mapleton's a town of around 1,700. and growing, right? But
Mhm.
it's the town that 50,000 miles a year I drive through a lot of them like this, right? And they're all many challenged by trying to cover all those different elements. So I think that's a really good highlight. And I think as you thought about that, as you looked at infrastructure, you talk about some of the conversations around the fire truck and investing in that. Where did childcare start to lift up as part of that conversation as something the city should be involved with, or that the community should be involved, do you think?
Yeah, again, a new school. Fortunately, we were the community that got the new K-12 school. And so again, when that was sort of being, discussed and talked about, the preschool piece went in, and I think if there had been one change we could have made when we did that new school, was to probably have been able to have seen a little further down the road, and built a little bit more. But again, had we done that, we probably wouldn't have passed the referendum to have the building. So you need to weigh all those decisions and options as well. But again, early on, we've been sort of subsidizing our community center, our community daycare, that we sort of work with the school, and it's just not a great structure. So, um, it's that whole daycare issue has just been an issue for us to continue to grow. Um, because again, it's hard to bring in or even ask a business to come into your community, even if they're bringing 10 employees and they have, half of them have two kids. You're bringing in, 10, 12 more kids to a, potential daycare setting, and we didn't have the spots. And so again, just to expand just a little bit, whether it's a business or a housing, um, without providing some form of daycare slots, it's a tough sell, and it's tough for people to make the move. And even if your community can give them a lot of incentives and stuff, it's just we found that the daycare was just that missing piece, and we had to figure it out.
Yeah, and for the benefit of everybody here, I had the opportunity to work on behalf of Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation with Mayor Annis and the local community early on. They did the exercise on the math for a center, and I know some of you on this call may have been involved in looking at that. Maybe you have a center in your community that maybe it's doing great, and we hope they are. Oftentimes,
Mhm.
right now, they're not, right? And it becomes a simple math equation. And I always say the benefit of our work is we love children as much as anybody else does, but we focus on the math of it, right? And really strip the emotion out of the equation. And so just as a little highlight, I wanted to share a slide here of why the math breaks oftentimes at that smaller capacity level, right? This is a traditional 57 seat center. And so when you start to look at the math of this, it really is a tight math equation, right? And the wages here are our biggest challenge. 70% of wages, often for a small center in particular, going right out the door. 70% of revenue going right out the door to wages, and that isn't people that are getting rich doing this work, right? Wage rates of 15 for aides, 18 for teachers. When we annualize that, right, a $36,000 price point, but often more and more requiring education, degrees, and other information. When we add in occupancy, when we add in, kids eat food, all of those things, they like to play with the paints. We really start to get to a really razor thin margin. And you can even see when a center has 57 seats, they're not actually able to generally run ever more than 90 to 93% of that operating license capacity. Why? Because infants are born at different times, and sometimes we're waiting a few weeks. Sometimes families have moved. Sometimes all sorts of things have happened. So it's often not because the operator is a poor operator. It's because they're working with a set of numbers. This is at a $225 a month, or excuse me, a week rate for infants, which is becoming even harder and harder to find. But this is a slide I love to show, because people say, well, Jeff, why doesn't it work? Well, the bottom line is the infant room is the anchor like anyone, right? We just kicked off fishing season last week here in Minnesota. We throw the anchor out, we're casting, right? The infant room is your proverbial anchor. It loses money in every operation. And the reality is that when you start looking at why, it's because of the labor, right? Infants don't eat that much food, but they sure require care, right? And we appreciate that as communities and as families. So when you think about what does that really mean, you see the retail investment for an infant room, even in a small center, is $375 a week. And I know when we illustrated some math in Mapleton, the room was really quiet when I dropped the punchline. It was a different set of numbers, but I thought I was going to be taking a quick ride out of town, right? So my point is that we see that well-intentioned efforts, the opportunities that we sometimes think about as a generic kind of answer to the solution comes with a really big challenge financially. And this assumes you can staff it. Right, any place we go right now, it doesn't matter childcare otherwise, it's hard to find people to do the work that we're needing done. And so that's another element that often in the last several years, we get calls frequently from programs, well, we're running about 50%. We're running about 70%. Well, as you can see, there's not a lot of room and margin there, right? So we can't be running at 70% of our goals. And so certainly a challenge and a opportunity that I think Mapleton realized at the time, like many communities do, the math just wasn't going to work. And so I want to talk a little bit, Mary Annis, about as we got to that punchline, not a real funny one. We talked about how do we better localize a strategy, right? The headlines of the news, if you look at the national headlines, $122 billion problem of childcare. Even at the state level, they often throw $1 billion on there. And I don't know, I hope somebody on this call has, but I've never seen $1 billion, right? And in many of our towns, $1 million is even a really big number. But when we start to localize our thinking about this, and we think about all of our towns often today, hopefully I have at least one family childcare provider. Here in Minnesota, that means 10 kids. What Jeff Marianne has highlighted is that a per capita of even $30,000, every slot of childcare equals a $30,000 opportunity of a job or more. In Minnesota, I think we're at 43,000 is our average per capita. Multiply that times 10, we're now talking $400,000 or $500,000 a year in wages being realized because there's childcare available. And where does that money go? Right? That money's getting spent at the Muni. It's getting spent on Main Street at the restaurant. It's getting spent on housing. It's getting spent on all the things that keep our community vibrant, paying tax rolls, funding all the other infrastructure that we need. Mary Annis, tell us a little bit about what that became, because you've gotten real close. You've done some great provider appreciation events you've got 6 providers right in town, several around town. As you started to localize that thinking, what did that mean to you? What did that mean as you started to look at it that way?
Well, to your point about the center, I mean, for us, it was real difficult to say, hey, how can we fill this? And again, um, ours was a little unique, again, probably unique to us, having to work with the school, because again, the school portion was, they were unioned, and so that made it even a little more difficult from the salary perspective, and even, you know, for us now to try to get that center um, going. Again, the salary was even potentially more than what it might be in other places. So again, that whole scenario for us just wasn't going to work. And again, as we talked about earlier, getting another fire truck and getting, the Muni updated and upgraded and looking at other facilities, the community center. And of course, not that the curling club is under the city, but again, that they do support it in a roundabout way. So again, all these different people wanting the funds, the daycare just wasn't. But again, it was what we needed, and we were just like every other community where the daycare slots were short, and and we needed them to be able to grow. So, it's just, it was sort of this, revolving door. It was just going around and spinning, and we had to come up with a solution.
And that solution being localized, I think what I've heard you and others talk about highlight is it makes it more consumable. It makes it seem more doable rather than you hit on it, right? Even if you were going to build a new center, at the labor, not labor, at the building cost right now per square foot and everything else involved with the center, often 5 to 8,000 square feet, you're at a $3-5 million price tag. Right, and so
Yeah.
we're talking about a $750,000 fire truck. Now multiply that times 6, 7 times, that becomes an even harder sell.
Right. And then, and again, to your point of keeping these people and creating business, uh, economic development, by having a childcare house, keeping that here. And again, I think maybe it was Tad we were talking about earlier, just, we're in a similar situation now with our school. Now we're probably going to see development around that school as far as residential development, and maybe even the convenience store, the grocery store, that kind of thing that all of a sudden starts to pop up around your, where you put in your new school. Um, I'm just saying to a developer, hey, let's look at doing this childcare house and actually bringing it right to your development and having it a part of your infrastructure as far as the housing development. And I think that's a huge perk for someone to be able to come in and come home or in the morning, get up and walk your kids over to the daycare house and go off to work or wherever that might be. Um, and again, we don't have probably another point that some of you might be able to do too is we don't have that big business. We're an ag community. And so and again, maybe a reason why we aren't, well, why we don't have that big business is because we don't have the available daycare. Because a business just isn't going to come and locate in your town just because. I mean, they want to know, what do you have for other infrastructure? What do you have for amenities? And again, one of those is going to be, be able to provide childcare and daycare. And, up until this point, we've had it the opposite way, where we've had existing businesses and existing people here having to go to the next town or the town beyond that just to find daycare. So, we had to, if we wanted to continue or wanted to grow and we wanted to flourish, we had to figure out a solution. And again, as Jeff said, we went through the whole process and I'm sure many of you have done that painstaking exercise of going through the numbers. And again, for us, the center just, the numbers just weren't going to work, and we as a city just weren't going to be able to help support
Right.
that project.
Well, and we're highlighting again, whether, we're, Mayor Annis, the community Mapleton moving forward with the childcare house, which is exciting. But even before you get to that point, building something new, we're often doing evaluation of, are there spaces within our community that could be a host to a childcare provider? In Northfield, Minnesota, we worked on behalf of Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation and Three Rivers Community Action to actually convert two of the soon to be empty classrooms from early Head Start into spaces that today host a mother-daughter team and a separate provider outside of their home, right? So taking home ownership out as the prerequisite to run and operate a small childcare business. I met a woman down in southeastern Minnesota a month or two ago, 20 years old, right out of high school. Her family benefited from having a second home that was available. She's been running a small family childcare out of there, right? She doesn't live in a place where she can do it. That was the limitation. And now, though, she's doing it, right? That career pathways extension. So we're looking at opportunities to think differently than what we've been doing. We're certainly excited about, like I said, the childcare house, but I don't want to overlook the fact that even helping individual providers, if that's your gig, providing space, if that's an opportunity, or getting to a place where you might be investing a longer term investment, like a childcare house to create an enduring space that hosts a provider and aligns with the needs of the community can be a really big and important opportunity. I want to highlight on that point, right? We start to again look at 10 slots. What does that mean in our community? What if we can support a provider and get them up and running? Right? I've heard from many providers over the years who said, boy, I would have started 2 or 3 years ago, Jeff, but I didn't have the money to buy all the equipment and all the materials and things that they said I should have in order to run a good childcare, right? And we're not talking about the creme de la creme, the premium, like we're talking about the basics, right? Cribs are like $500 now, right? You want to get the right books and learning materials. These aren't, small dollars. And so oftentimes some of our well-meaning grants, the $500, $1,000 startup grants are really great, but they're often not enough to help support somebody who's really ready to go, but maybe stemming by the lack of finance. So it's something to think about there as an opportunity. The one that Mayor Annis highlighted, I think all of you have probably heard too, is for our families. For our families that are driving a half hour the wrong way out of town and then driving right back through town a half hour the other way and doing that multiple times a day, we're losing time, right? Our families are losing time, and the old saying, we value money or value time as money. We start to think about what that means. Even the idea that if I don't have childcare, I can't get a job, right? We talk about that wage, but even beyond that, we're talking about convenience, accessibility, and the ability to keep childcare closer to home. That's the one thing that's often overlooked is actually people don't want to bring their kids somewhere else. We live in our towns like Floodwood and Mapleton and others because we love our town, right? And what we see, and I've seen time and time again, too many times, unfortunately, is little Bobby and his mom ended up going wherever else to find childcare. We've heard this story. Soon enough, after mom picks Bobby up from school enough times, and we stop at the store because it's right there. Then we're eating. Now Bobby's got friends, and what does Bobby's family do at some point? They move to that town, right? And it takes away from the fabric of our communities that we're working so hard to maintain. So think about that, right? From a family perspective, beyond the social good and the quality that's going to happen and all that, we're bringing life back to families' lives when they can endure and stay focused on that. From an employer perspective, we know what that means when people can show up to work, right? I had a town that 55 open second shift positions and a huge loss of revenue and outcomes. So for that business, they're looking at right now actually doing a 6-unit village. Why? Because they're gonna have a few that'll do second shift, there's some that are gonna do day shift, they're gonna help support it. It's gonna be a really fun and exciting deal. But it's again thinking about they're getting 672 slots, same bigger than the center, but now they diversified. They've got six different kinds of care. They've got 6 providers, new women, generally business owners that are going to be able to help support and host. That's where we start to multiply the outcome. And when we look at it over a 20-year term, we're into the millions as far as the investment return for 10 slots. In this case, a child care house in Mapleton, in whatever case it is in your community, certainly something to start looking at that way, right? It's not just for the love of children and families, and it is the love of what's going to happen there, but the math is really strong behind it. Mayor Annis, and I do want to get to the point where we can have more discussion and conversation. As you've been on this journey now, as you've learned more, just from the numbers perspective, are you still convinced this is the right path forward for Mapleton?
Yeah, definitely for Mapleton. I was up at the finance committee a couple weeks ago testifying for some bonding money. And one of them was, I've told Jeff this story, where they want 3 million for a center. And, I just wanted to jump up and say, hold it. Look, you can build, for it was like 70 slots. And I was going to hold it. We could build for 3 million. You can build about 9 or 10 of these houses and have 100 to 120 slots. And you can now have 9 to 10, new businesses coming into town. And as Jeff has talked about, and again, I think the really neat thing about this is some of these business owners might be your 21, 22-year-old gals that are, and again, but do they they do they have the funds to actually build a house so they can do in-home daycare? No, I mean, they're not there yet, right? And so, they're able to get licensed and certified and start a business at 20, 21 years old. And what a nice thing for your community. And again, a lot of these are, and they have the passion about daycare. And so, I no, we're definitely, this is absolutely the right path for us. And again, the more we've even talked about it at a city level is, wouldn't it be cool now if we could start, the next one we can strategically put somewhere into a part of our town that doesn't have an in-home daycare now. And so we sort of start localizing it by neighborhoods. And, what a nice, possibility that might be, um, for us. And now as we develop, as things start to progress out by our new school, which is on the edge of town, um, and again, that starts to, develop, where do we next potentially put or talk to, a developer about putting in a place. And again, I don't think it's really been mentioned, but if at all this ever were to fall flat on its face, this is just a one bedroom, really a house that for a young couple, a senior, um, couple. So again, the risk you're taking, um, I'm building and some of this kind of infrastructure isn't nearly as great as what, that 3 million, and that's just right. That's just the structure of a center. So it just, just the numbers just didn't make sense for us in Mapleton. Um, and again, this is just giving us a lot more versatility and, to the point being of putting in this center at 3 million. Look, if we only have to put in 3 or 4 of these houses, we're way money ahead, um, financially, just putting this in because now, the center itself, might only be half full, whereas now these houses would be full. So we can strategically put in childcare houses where we want them, when we want them, and to meet the needs of our community as it grows.
Appreciate it, Mayor Anderson. Just for everybody's benefit, this is what the child care house looks like, a residential, as he said, 800 square foot space, designed and laid out as a residential. It is a residential dwelling in its fullest form, but laid out, equipped, turnkey, for all the features and finishes that create a quality space for family child care. So it's a model you can replicate again in an existing space, a new space.
Mhm.
Certainly we continue to nod our hat to those that are providing care in their home. And I think there's great opportunities to continue providing existing support, doing a provider appreciation event. The idea and the hope that your takeaway today is that the ROI for childcare in whatever form it is exists. It's about finding the right way and the right outcome that aligns with your community's needs in a way that's meaningful and helpful. Mayor Annis, before we open it up for questions, discussion, I hope everybody's maybe got a question, makes it more interesting. Is there anything that you're additionally thinking about from a messaging in the community perspective? Is there anything, sometimes in my experience, I've heard communities say childcare is not our problem, not our deal.
Yeah.
And either right or wrong, everybody's got a deal, but if you were talking about, and I think you've done a really good job of this, certainly engaging the existing providers is where you started, but maybe just briefly share how you've messaged it to the rest of the community that sometimes doesn't maybe see this as the right infrastructure investment.
Yeah, and again, that's an interesting concept because again, some communities their EDAs are very aggressive, as far as, uh, building a possible, apartments and those kinds of facilities, and to create more housing, and some just aren't. But again, in our situation, we've had, an existing daycare that's again, but we've been helping subsidize that because again, as we saw earlier, the numbers in that just were not working. And so, and in our situation, we had the old school, but that was actually in the referendum was to be torn down and been, returned to green space. And so now that's being developed. So, here again, maybe there will be a daycare house back onto that spot. And again, I talked about the new school. It just, right then it wasn't in the plans because we had to pass the referendum. And again, probably, having something like that in that referendum was going to not help that vote. So again, and I've done what I just call our state of the city. I just talked about our city where it's at, and again that we need childcare as one of those three legs to the stool of housing and business and childcare, for us to continue to survive first of all, and then flourish and continue to grow. Because again, when when it's nice we have this nice new school setting, and again we're drawing the people from Mankato. I do a little sub driving the bus, and so we're going right into that in the community of Mankato, bringing open enrolled kids to and again, as Jeff mentioned earlier, they create friends out here, and then all of a sudden mom and dad say, oh, maybe we'll move out there. And again, that sort of, helps our community. But again, I think, and I would be in that same boat, having a young family, do I want to drive 15, 20 miles one way in the morning and same thing in the afternoon for daycare if I don't have to and I can do it right in my own community where I live, work, and play. So again, it is a sticky question, Jeff, as to the whether or not communities and cities. But again, I think and our people and our community have really sort of, I think, bought into the scenario of we can strategically build and grow daycare slots systematically and at a very reasonable cost. And it's really creating business, a business in our community, one business at a time. And that business is daycare. And again, for families that can just take their child, be in town, and not have to, if Johnny gets sick and now you've got to run down, make an extra trip. Again, it's just a huge benefit. But again, we can systematically do it, and we can actually budget if we need to. A lot easier 300,000 or 350,000 than it is to budget 3 million and then try to staff it and make sure that it's at capacity and generating income. So again, the pros on this in our community, I think everyone sort of saw it as, I would say, it was a no-brainer. Just because of all the pros that came with the whole concept, the whole process, the whole procedure versus a center. And again, and that's just for us in our community of Mapleton, which is just an ag community. Like Jeff said, 1,700. It just made all the sense in the world.
And a great place to visit too. It's everybody doesn't know, the curling capital of Minnesota.
There you go.
Mayor Annis, thank you.
Curling capital?
What's that?
Did you say the curling capital?
Yes, we're the curling capital of Minnesota, oldest curling club in the state. So
Wow.
you have a little curling up in your neck of the woods too, Tad.
Yeah, I know. We just don't have it here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Mayor Annis, appreciate again, you spending time and sharing the journey for you and the community of Mapleton. Again, I welcome, comments in the chat if you have any questions, if you just wanna come on mic and ask a question. Any questions for the mayor as far as their journey or questions in general about the ROI of saying yes?
I got one, Jeff. So how tough was it to convince your council to get on board with this?
A great question. And thanks for that. Well, we had, as Jeff mentioned, through our foundation, we had met up with Jeff and Trish in the business of childcare, and we went through those studies. And so our council was going through all those, like I said, painstaking meetings of looking at the numbers. And, it's just, what can I say? It's just almost depressing, right? It's just like you just can't believe the numbers, and then you start to understand why, in our community that just didn't work. So they were seeing it from the beginning, the numbers and what was working and what wasn't working. And then when we got connected with the business of childcare, we said, hey, we're gonna go to deed. And so, fortunately, we were able to get a nice grant through deed, which covered over half of our expenses. And so, off we go. And so now we're into that sort of phase of talking to our foundations and our businesses and, other potential funding sources. My goal is to get the whole thing no taxpayer dollars. Um, and again, so if we can do that, now all of a sudden, now we're starting to take some of the funds that we're getting from the monthly lease and rent and, putting it away and looking at another one. And so that just continues to grow. So again, we were in the right place at the right time for a deed grant, but all those things. And I have always stressed to any of the really politicians, I guess. When we were talking to our representative, and Senator Klobuchar had sent someone down to the groundbreaking. I got in his ear and just said, "Hey, this," and I told the people that were at that groundbreaking that to remember this day, because this might be a day in history that we helped solve this childcare issue. And again, it's not just Mapleton, it's not Minnesota, it's across the country, that they're having these issues. So if this is something we can do, to help solve this crisis, um, and I think it is, because again, it's to me, and again, for our situation, and it's a win-win, probably a win-win all the way across the board, because we're creating economic development, we're creating a business, we're helping parents get local daycare and good daycare, and again, hopefully keeping a price point that's reasonable. So it really wasn't hard, Tad, to get the council on board when you could explain it as we've tried to today, of doing it from a math perspective, that the numbers for us work here. And again, you're fortunate enough to had funds to be able to recapture a school setting. Ours, we weren't, because again, that's why we had to get out, because our infrastructure within the school was so bad that there was only one option for us, and that was to tear it down and to turn it into a green space. And so, well, that's out of the equation. And so this is what we were left with.
I like your in-home, like you're doing this as a in-home daycare.
Mm-hmm.
So ours is a center, and we've looked at doing that to where we would take it from just having 4 people take leases from us and they can run their own daycare out of that room, and they would all be approved and everything. Our first thing is that people want to work for the daycare center, but they don't want to be their own boss. And then we would go from having 10 infant slots to 8 infant slots, and our infant slots are constantly full. We have a waiting list, and we can get licensed for more infants, but there's, like Jeff said, there's no money in infants. That's the money. That's your anchor right there. That's dragging you down. So
It's the best analogy for the season of the year, right? With
yes,
an opener. But what you're highlighting, Tad, too, if I can just jump in, is that we're seeing even some centers that when I say overbuilt, they built for, I've worked with one right now in a different part of the state, and they built for 95 kids. Well, if you
Yeah.
do the math, there's never going to be 95 kids that need care, right? Like you'd have to have the perfect, as I say, the sun, the moon, and the rainbows all aligned to get that that model to play out. So what we've been helping communities think about is, do you even split it? Minnesota, we're fortunate because you can do this, but do you maintain the smaller center and take those 2 extra rooms now and convert them into spaces that host a local family provider, so you can diversify your care even a little bit more, right? Because I know infants, but Floodwood, where you're at, the second shift, if you're working second shift, where are you going to go? Right? Where do you go if you got some of those, if you're working in nursing now and Duluth, there's also some of those needs that smaller care, when we think about just general business, smaller units of delivery often have the ability to be a little bit more niche, flexible, whatever you want to term it, because they're not structured with a mass of a center. So something to think about there too, as you examine paths forward.
yeah.
The other thing,
Our biggest. Go ahead.
no,
Well,
I
I
was
ju-
just gonna say,
oh.
the other thing, really with this is, again, whoever the owner or the operator is, do they do after-home daycare? Do they do nighttime babysitting? Do they do weekend? They have some flexibility to set up their own business. Whereas probably in a center that sometimes gets tough, since Jeff talks about the second shift or third shift kind of people, sometimes that gets very costly in a center setting to have just open the center.
Yeah.
But now, if we're in this house setting, I think it gives that operator a little more flexibility to say, hey, here's another revenue stream I can get, once a week, which just maybe adds a little frosting onto the total take-home salary. So, and again,
Yeah.
if someone's not is willing to work, they get rewarded.
So in Wadena, we started the project, and actually we're going to be opening ours up in June here.
Congratulations.
We were fortunate enough that in May of 2023, our hospital built a brand new facility, and the legacy campus that is left, we're being able to repurpose that. The hospital is maintaining ownership of the building, but we took one of the wings that were rooms before, and we've created 4 individual pods. So they'll be their own bosses. It'd be just like an in-home one. Down the wing, they're a mirror image of each one. They're all built the same size. There's one communal kitchen that they'll share at different times. They have their own restrooms, and we'll be getting probably about between 40 and 50 openings when we're done with this and we get it open. The hospital was great to partner with because they kept ownership of the building, so we did not have to buy the building. We raised the money between, we got a grant from DEED. We got grants from a couple other associations. The city chipped in some. Local businesses pledged 110,000. Local individuals pledged about 65,000 to bring up a total of 420,000. And that's what we needed to do this project.
Nice.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that story. And that again just illustrates how you start looking at it more at that local level. Don't worry about everybody else and everybody else's things. You start to see some opportunities. And another one that might be familiar in many of your communities is the decommissioned elementary school. Working on several projects here in the state and other places where the developers are coming along. Maybe we're going to do some housing in there. Maybe we're going to do, again, kind of right-sized outcomes. The pod model, the hosted space model is one that is another consideration in some instances to be a part of some of those solutions. So I appreciate you sharing that. Other questions or comments or feedback?
I got
Anybody?
one.
Yeah,
I
please.
got, with the daycare center, the regulations has to be done over, and you're going to find this out with just the in-home daycares too. The regulations that they want to come out with is just crazy. And then, I mean, like our daycare center, we had a play area because it's, if you go outside the door, there's the playground for the school is there, but we can't use that. So we had to put in our own play area and it had to be fenced off. It has to have 2 egresses. And then all of a sudden they're like, one person says, yep, it's fine. The next person says, oh, you need to have panic bars on your gates. So then you go to look for panic gates that have panic bars, and you're looking at $2,000 a piece for 2 gates. And now you're looking at $4,000. You know, fortunately, myself, I was an iron worker, and a friend of mine, we were able to do it ourselves, and it cost us about $400. But it's just, every regulation is such a knee-jerk regulation when it comes to daycare. It's just becoming ridiculous.
Yeah, and they
And
are,
that,
to your point, they are going through a series of modernization processes right now. Lots of feedback there. From our perspective, we believe obviously in good license, quality care. We let the others who are more attuned to whether that's what that means exactly. But I think you do highlight the cost of regulation, safety, all these things, certainly heightened with childcare. I often say it's like weddings, right? If you say anything's a wedding, you might as well triple the cost because now it's for a wedding, right? Same like childcare, it feels like sometimes. But other questions or thoughts today? Any other ideas to share? I do want to encourage you, if you're looking just for some numbers, some data, as Mayor Annis had highlighted, you go to our website, Business of Childcare, our childcare house page, right up at the top here. It breaks into and really gets into the math behind childcare, right? And we certainly present this in the framework of a childcare center, but if you click into the learn more, you can get some of the background and information as to what leads to and contributes to the different ROIs, right, that we're trying to accomplish as it relates to the math of it. Certainly, if you're looking at or evaluating opportunities in your own community, we welcome an opportunity to connect with you and just learn more about where your effort is, and hope to have that opportunity. And if there's any other questions, I know Mayor Annis has been very gracious with his time, and amongst all the other things that he's doing, I know he's happy to have a check-in conversation if you want to talk more specifically about your community. And we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn and all of that. On our mayor's page, I think many of you are familiar with, we will put the meeting notes, summary, kind of takeaways from our session today. So if you have other mayors that are working on the challenges and opportunities for childcare, be sure to share that. Our next session will be June 5th. And this is one we didn't spend a lot of time on today, but we get all the numbers, we get all the ROI, we get all of that. We still got to figure out how to pay for it. And one of the things that we worked really hard to do with our partners, Tad, I know you've had an opportunity to work with Rural Pathways and others, is basically help create customized funding roadmaps. Particular for childcare house, it's built in as part of the overall investment. So how do you get the deed grant? Who's going to fill out the deed grant application? Who's going to do the reporting on that? We built all of that in both to the childcare house and the hosted spaces as an add-on for answering that question. And so we'll use that session June 5th to really kind of talk about all the different methods of funding, all the different ways that we might think about funding it. And then at the end of that, combining what we took away from today with that to think about how do you start presenting the simple ROI argument on whatever childcare project you might be embarking on. So I encourage you to join us and encourage you to stay in touch with us in the meantime. Any other questions, comments, or feedback today?
I just
Yeah,
want to say, oh, go ahead, Marianne.
I put in the chat my email and cell phone if they want to get a hold of me.
And I was gonna say too, if you guys have any questions, I think that all of you by now have my email. Feel free to reach out to me and then I can reach out to Marianne if there's questions that I can't answer. So feel free to reach out to any of us.
Thanks again, Mayor Annis. Thanks again, everybody, for making time in your day. We appreciate your attention and interest in childcare and look forward to being a resource for you in the future. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.